Chapter 26 of The Airship Boys in the Great War by Lysle Ferrée. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Tom Hirsch. Chapter 26, An Attempt to Assassinate the Emperor. Alan, Bob, and Buck were nearly frantic with worry over the still missing Ned by the time darkness closed in. "If any harm has come to that boy," vowed Buck fiercely, "I swear that I'll leave no stone unturned until I find out the guilty parties and punish them." Bob bit his lip gloomily. "We're all hoping for the best, of course," said he, "and really I believe that Ned can take care of himself all right. A knife in the back, a blow from a dark doorway as he passed, any of a score of possibilities here," muttered Buck. Alan shuddered and made a desperate effort to change the conversation. "What are we going to do to frustrate the plot on the Emperor's life?" he asked. "If we do anything on that, it must be pretty soon, because time is flying, and I recall that Ned overheard them say at that other table that the meeting hour had been set for 11 o'clock. "That's right," chorused the other boys. "We mustn't let our anxiety for Ned permit us to neglect the other thing. How shall we go about it?" They missed their chum's ready foresight in planning a course of action then, but, on the whole, did succeed in mapping out a pretty fair course of procedure. It was Bob Russell's idea. He said, "Ned stated that some of the servants in the chateau had been bribed into sympathy with the conspirators, and will admit them secretly into the house. The man with the big black beard and he of the twisted mouth were to slip into the sleeping emperor's bedchamber through a window reached by a ladder against the wall. The emperor was to be strangled. Now, what I suggest is that we use the ocean flyer to get there, landing some distance away so as not to be heard from the chateau. We can then lie in wait, hidden by the lawn shrubbery, until the miscreants arrive. We can then pounce upon them and nip the murder right in the bud." "Would it not be better to first warn the inmates of the chateau of what is afoot?" asked Alan. "No, that wouldn't do at all, because neither we nor the emperor know which of the attendants are faithful and which are treacherous. We'll have to play this game single-handed, boys." So finally it was agreed to adopt the scheme as originally suggested by Bob. Their preparations for departure at that hour of the night were noted with great curiosity by the other aviators of the Austrian hangars, and Captain von Schleinitz, the young officer who had driven to the hospital with them and told them about the local conditions when they first arrived, said casually, "You choose a peculiar hour for starting off again, gentlemen." "Yes," Bob answered him. "We're only going on a small flight. Mr. Napier is not returned yet, so we will of course be back for him. How I wish that I might be privileged to accompany you on one of your flights." Alan and Buck overheard his remark, and, after excusing themselves for the seeming discourtesy, took Bob aside. "Listen, Bob," Alan whispered. "Why not take Captain von Schleinitz along with us on tonight's expedition? He impresses me as a brave, good fellow, and the presence of a regular Austrian army officer aboard might prove of great help in several ways. Patrolling military airplanes might stop us with all sorts of questions once we get into the air." "I guess you're right, Alan," said Bob thoughtfully. "Let's take him into our confidence then and explain the whole matter." This was accordingly done. The Austrian was horrified by the revelation of the plot, and urged all possible haste. By 10:30 the flyer's engines were started, and the short flight to Schönbrunn was begun. No lights were shown aboard, as the boys were anxious to avoid all unwelcome attentions. No attempt was made to hinder their progress, and a landing was made almost noiselessly, not far from the enclosed gardens of the chateau. No one of the boys was willing to be left behind in charge of the airship while the others went forward into the adventure. Yet it was imperative that someone should stay. After considerable heated discussion, it was finally decided to draw lots. This method determined upon Buck as the one to remain behind, which he submitted to with much disappointment. Alan, Bob, and Captain von Schleinitz gripped his hand hard in a last goodbye, and slipped stealthily away into the darkness. Buck was left alone. There was no moon visible that night. The sky lowered with the threat of storm. Streamers of clouds scudded as if frightened before the strong wind. In a nearby marsh, the frogs and crickets made melancholy music. Afar off to the right somewhere a dog howled mournfully. 9 cloak-shrouded figures stood in close conference at the Spavatka turnpike, a bare 10 minutes' walk from the Chateau Schönbrunn. Their manner was mysterious, sinister. They were impatiently waiting for someone. Far down the road, the purr of a motor could be heard, growing rapidly lower. Suddenly it ceased altogether, and a 10th sepulchral figure stalked toward them through the gloom. A subdued murmur of satisfaction greeted his approach. "At last you are here, Count Paunch." A quick hand was clapped over the mouth of the big black-bearded man who spoke. "Hush, you fool! No names here!" The newcomer did not address the others, but with a finger to his lips enjoining silence, he led them towards where the high walls enclosing the grounds of the Chateau Schönbrunn loomed up through the darkness. Tiptoeing close to the huge iron gates, the leader of the band shoved gently. The ponderous gate swung inwards upon hinges that had been freshly greased to preclude all danger of squeaking. Just inside the gates a sentry lay securely bound and gagged on the damp grass. The chateau servants had earned their blood money. Alan, Bob, and von Schleinitz were crouched behind the thick shrubbery, so near that they could have reached out and touched the stealthy intruders. Revolvers were held ready for instant use. "Look," whispered Bob. "The huge bearded man there is the one whom Buck trailed down. There is the thug with the twisted mouth. That fat little man shivering in the wind is the Grand Chancellor. And yes, by Jove, that fellow there who seems to be giving them directions is the very man whom Ned set out to follow. If he is here, where is poor Ned?" The tall man whom the conspirators had addressed as Count did very little talking. At a signal from him, Blackbeard and Twisted Mouth slipped away around the corner of the chateau, and the remainder of the band slunk noiselessly over the grass to where the silent black pile of the building showed through the trees. Alan, Bob, and von Schleinitz skulked close at their heels, dodging from bush to tree trunk to shrub. It was harrowing work. Once a stone crunched under Bob's foot as he darted across a gravel path. "What was that?" The group of conspirators had whirled about in consternation, weapons shining dully in their hands. Only a deathly stillness rewarded their listening, however. Finally, the little fat man who was Chancellor of the realm laughed nervously. "Bah, it was nothing. We are unstrung tonight," he said in a low voice. "But tomorrow," evil anticipation lit up the faces of his companions. "Ready now," whispered he whom they had called Count. The 10 of them slipped through the unlocked door into the house where the aged emperor slept, all unconscious of the hands at his throat. End of chapter 26. Recording by Tom Hirsch.